It is a safe bet that much of Massachusetts supports the criminal case against Donald Trump. And after the former president was arraigned in Manhattan this week, the Democratic members of the state's congressional delegation all put out statements lauding the effort to hold Trump accountable. But, as you can imagine, most Republicans in Massachusetts felt very differently. According to a new poll from Boston-based Opinion Diagnostics, nearly 80% of GOP primary voters in the state think his indictment is an unjustified political attack. My next guest is among them, Chair of the MassGOP, Amy Carnevale. Amy, good to see you. And
good to see you, Adam.
Thanks for being here.
Thanks for having me.
You put out a statement about the Trump indictment earlier this week, but I'd like to hear you just discuss here face-to-face what your take is on the legal proceedings that we're watching.
So I do think the legal argument is tenuous. You know, the original charges, it was a misdemeanor offense that occurred, years ago for which the statute of limitations had expired. So, and you have a DA in Manhattan who campaigned on the idea that he was going to indict Donald Trump. So he took these misdemeanor charges, created a kind of a felony charge, which, may actually, be in fact, valid, but it seems like it was created to fit the circumstances in this case. And it seems that Donald Trump really was singled out because of who he is and because he's running for president. And I think in America, that's wrong.
I know that there are Trump critics who've had negative things to say about the indictment. Our legal specialist, our analyst, Daniel Medwed, who's a professor at Northeastern, he had a different take. I want to just play you a bit of what he had to say, get your reaction to it, and then we'll move on.
Okay, sure.
A lot of people are talking about how this is political. It's not. Alvin Bragg did not indict Donald Trump. Grand jurors did. Regular citizens in New York issued this indictment, between 16 and 23 people. A lot of other people are saying how novel the legal theory is behind this case. It's not. There have been something like 29 prosecutions for falsifying business records in the First Department, which is the region of New York that covers Manhattan and the Bronx, just since 2009. So this isn't a new case, and it's not necessarily as political as some people would want folks to believe.
Does that take make you feel any better about the indictment?
It does not change my opinion. It's really easy to get a grand jury to approve moving to the next step in a case like this. So it doesn't change my opinion at all.
There is that old saw about how a good lawyer can get a grand jury to indict a ham sandwich, right?
I
think that's
exactly
the
right.
cliche. All right, when you ran for chair of the MassGOP against Jim Lyons, your predecessor, you promised that you were going to try to end a schism that had developed between passionate supporters of Donald Trump on the one hand and supporters of Governor Baker and his more moderate approach on the other. I should note that you were a supporter or have been a supporter of both men. A poll came out right after the indictment which indicated that this might increase support for President Trump in the MassGOP. It was taken of likely MassGOP voters. We mentioned it a moment ago, actually, Opinion Diagnostics. 42% of people polled said the indictment of Trump would make them more likely to vote for him in 2024. 46% said it would have no effect, and 12% said it would make them less likely to vote for him. If the indictment of Trump gives a new life to attachment to and support for his candidacy, is it going to make you harder to heal the MassGOP in the way that you hope to?
I will say that, the people who feel passionately about Donald Trump in this case have really, come to the forefront. And it does tend to inflame the political passions at a time when I think we were starting to move past some of these schisms in the party and really the electorate more generally. So kind of having Donald Trump, kind of come to the forefront, I do think it inflames passions, both in the Republican side and the Democratic side too. I think people tend to get more heated, and you hear pundits and pontificate about what this means, as we were talking about today.
Yeah, as we've been doing in a sense.
Yeah.
So what's your message going to be then to the Republican rank and file as you continue trying to steer the party in a new direction and back to relevance, to keep maybe this divide between Baker loyalists, Trump loyalists from coming to the fore again?
Yeah, so I've not been shy about talking about how I do think this particular prosecution of Donald Trump is politically motivated. At the same time, though, I think the bigger picture here in Massachusetts, and for me as party chair, is to think about elections here at home. and the type of candidate we want to run as Republicans to build our party and try to attract voters from the middle, because that's necessary here in Massachusetts.
All right, let's talk about the type of candidates that you would like to run. We're 3 months, I guess, now into January, February, March. Yeah, okay, I counted correctly. We're well into a period in which Democrats have complete control of the state house. Have you been able to identify a message yet, or a type of candidate that you think is going to be able to make your party relevant again?
Yeah, so, I would return, when you're thinking statewide, to that model of fiscal conservatism and talking about taxes and spending. We have, surprisingly, I would say, we have seen Governor Healey kind of tacked a little bit more to the right than I think people initially thought, but she has a very progressive legislature that she's dealing with. And you saw that the tax package that she primarily picked up from Governor Baker, is getting some pushback on Beacon Hill. So those are the type of issues I think we want to be talking about as a party.
You anticipated exactly where I wanted to go, because I wanted to get your take on Governor Healey, who has taken some heat from the left for being too much like Governor Baker. Is it harder to craft a new identity for the Mass GOP, or maybe a return to an old identity for the party, if the Democratic governor, the most prominent politician in the state, is taking a page out of your former Republican governor who was wildly popular with voters? Does it make it harder to differentiate in the way you're going to need to?
Yes. So we still have 4 years until she's up for re-election. So in the immediate term, we're looking at a U.S. Senate race and state House and Senate races. And as I alluded to earlier, we have a state House and Senate that is widely progressive, and I think out of touch with really where many voters are in the Commonwealth. So I think those are the kind of messages, and those are the policies that we'll be looking at.
So just as I try to think this through in real time, the best case scenario for you politically and for the Mass GOP might be to have the legislature decline to follow Healey's lead on these issues, try to drag her to the left on various matters, and then you could come in and present a slate of candidates and say, look, they're needed as a corrective to what we see at the State House.
Well, I think the idea of balance and political balance is always important, and so that's really the message that we'll be focused on.
Democrats, as you know, just took control of the state Supreme Court in Wisconsin, where they elect their state Supreme Court after an election that was very much focused on the reversal of Roe. At least that's what Democrats wanted to talk about. What, if any, message do you think the Mass GOP should have when it comes to abortion moving forward?
Yeah, there's no getting around. I think that was a loss for the Republican Party moving forward. And I think at this point, it's still a little too early to understand what the message is from that. But I do know the Republicans nationally are in the Republican National Committee, I've heard, is looking at that race and the election and thinking about the messages. And I will be as well.
Can you elaborate on that at all? Because Governor Baker's, and again, you have been complimentary of Governor Baker. I remember talking with you when Jeff Deal was readying what could have been a primary challenge against Governor Baker, and you said it was nonsensical. Here was that was not your term, but that's my read on what you said. Didn't make sense to primary a governor like Charlie Baker. His approach to abortion seemed to me to be, I'm not going to go as far in the left or progressive direction as some Democrats would like, but I'm also not going to allow a whittling away of abortion rights. I'm going to take preemptive action to make sure that something along the lines of Roe is on the books here in Massachusetts. Do you think that's the right way for Republicans to go, or do you think Republicans need to be more, here in Massachusetts, need to be more conservative than Baker on abortion?
I think the law in Massachusetts is clear, and it's clear that that's not going to change anytime soon. So I think as Republicans, many in the party are pro-life, but as we think about the issue of abortion, we want to think about things like parental consent and some of those kind of surrounding issues. And again, when we're running for office as candidates, talk about the fiscal issues that really are more achievable and things that we can work on.
You're probably going to answer this next question in a similar way, but I want to ask you about another social issues topic. After our interview, I'm going to talk with a couple people about a push on the South Coast by some conservative activists to look at maybe banning certain books from school libraries, also questioning accommodations for transgender students, questioning sexual education as it's taught in schools. Does conservative activism on those topics pull the Mass GOP in the wrong direction, or could activism in those areas be part of the mix for the party moving forward?
Yeah, I think those are important, all important issues to have a discussion about, not just as in the Republican Party, but more broadly with parents and educators about, what is the right solution on books and where do you draw the line? Because the questions are important and the answers are not always easy. So I think the dialogue is important, and it does tend to bring people out who are passionate about the education of their kids and the policy. So I think it's okay to have that dialogue, and sometimes we do see candidates come forward not only for school committees, but then perhaps even elevate to run for higher office down the line. So I think it's okay to have those discussions, provided it's done in a respectful way.
Okay. Lisa Kaczynski at Politico reported today that in the party caucuses, tell me if I've got the mechanics here right, the party caucuses that you have called for the MassGOP, that supporters of your predecessor, Jim Lyons, are in some cases running against candidates who are supportive of you because they don't believe that you are conservative enough and that the party under your leadership is going to be conservative enough. Are you surprised by that pushback?
I think there's frankly more to these races than just about the personalities of the former chair and myself. I do think it is. I think the majority of Republicans, both statewide and on the Republican State Committee who are elected, want to move towards that future and that next day and think about the future of the party and one that is not in debt and not embroiled in controversy. But there's a small number of active Republicans in the minority who I think are frankly, want to live in the past and so they're active and kind of continuing to cause trouble within the party. I don't think that's particularly helpful to our party long term, and so that's the vision that I try to espouse and to lead by.
Is Jim Lyons part of that attempt? I mean, my sense from Lisa's coverage is that he's been cheering some of these candidates on. Is he working to undermine you?
I'm not sure. I haven't had any conversations with him personally. I wish him well, in his future endeavors, but I'm not sure to what extent he's involved.
The last time you and I chatted by phone was when Elizabeth Warren announced that she was going to be seeking re-election. You mentioned that race just a minute ago. Mm-hmm. At the time, you told me that the GOP, you were confident, was going to field a credible challenger to her, and that 2 Republicans had already expressed interest. You also told me that it wasn't time yet to share who they are. Can you divulge anything about the identity of one or both of the people, or maybe it's more at this point, who are looking at this race?
Yeah, so I'm still aware of 2 Republicans who are seriously looking at it. I know one has been down to Washington, D.C. and had some meetings. Another one is here in the Bay State and kind of has formed a team, kind of seriously looking at the race. So I think it's too early to say, but there's still 2 Republicans, seriously considering running.
I don't know if she is one of the Republicans who you're talking about, but would this be a race that Karyn Polito, Charlie Baker's lieutenant governor, you think she might help the party if she were to throw her hat in the ring for this contest?
I think Karyn Polito would make an excellent candidate for whatever race she might be thinking about down the line, and I hope she does consider future office again.
Have you conveyed that to her at any point in the past few weeks?
I have conveyed to her that I would love to see her run for future office.
And what does she have to say?
I think she's enjoying her time off right now. I'll kind of leave it at that. And she's enjoying a little break from the public spotlight.
All right, Amy Carnevale, thank you. Good to talk to you.
Great, thank you.